Good morning, everyone. It's such an honor to be up here with this panel this morning, and I want to thank ASHCA for bringing us all together. I'm Amy Liebman, and I work with the Migrant Clinicians Network. MCN focuses on the health and safety of migrant and immigrant workers, and one of the great things about my work is that we partner with the National Children's Center for Rural Agricultural Safety and Health and help them in their efforts to care for and address the needs of migrant children. A few years ago, the Children's Center began working with Redlands Christian Migrant Association to develop a pesticide safety education program to complement and promote decontamination stations set up at various RCMA child care centers. The idea of this program was to help farm worker parents prevent their children from being exposed to pesticides. Coming to pick their children up after work, RCMA wanted to help minimize the residual or para-occupational exposure of children as their parents pick them up, because the pesticides may be on the parents' clothing, on their skin, on their shoes. The Children's Center asked me to provide some assistance to the project, but more importantly, they really wanted me to learn more about RCMA, because after all, here we had an organization taking care of farm worker children, and they were integrating ag health and safety into their programming. What I saw really blew me away. Here was an organization caring for thousands of farm worker and rural children in Florida. And it was not just a child care center. RCMA is a community development organization, and if we really want to get serious about protecting children while their parents work, we really need to take a good hard look at the RCMA model. We invite you to join us this morning as we take a look at why we should be doing this, how we should be doing this, and the results of such an amazing effort to protect farm worker children. I want to just spend a little bit of time. I want to introduce each of our three panelists. First, I'd like you to meet Medora Crome. She's an avocado grower, as was her father. For the Cromes, both avocados and RCMA is family business. Her father was a participant in RCMA since its inception in 1965, and he honored RCMA with a $500,000 endowment to offer scholarships for RCMA staff to continue their education. Medora is carrying on the family tradition. She believes so much in RCMA that she paid to have her daughter attend their child care center, and now she serves on the board of directors. At the end, we have Barbara Mainster, the executive director of RCMA, and it's hard to find words to describe the justice and passion and commitment that Barbara brings to farm workers. For the past 25 years, she has led RCMA, and an organization that has literally served thousands of families, offering a safe place and a trusted place for children to stay while parents work. And we're going to conclude with Lourdes Villanueva. At age 11, Lourdes and her family came to the U.S. to pick our fruit and our vegetables. In the early 1980s, Lourdes, then a mother of three, came to RCMA because she wanted a safe place for her children to stay while she harvested tomatoes with her husband. One of RCMA's requirements is that parents become involved, and involved Lourdes became. She went on to become an RCMA staff member, got her GED, went to community college, and got her bachelor's degree. She now serves as Director of Farm Worker Advocacy for RCMA. And she's received numerous awards, and perhaps the most touching tribute to Lourdes is an NPR StoryCorps interview with Lourdes and her son, Roger. The interview ends with something that every mother would love to hear, but it's so true. The interview ends with her son saying, "If my wife can be half the woman my mother is, I will be okay." So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our participants.
My father was in agriculture all his life, and his father was before him. We grew tree crops, but in South Florida, you can't drive down a country road without seeing a tomato field or a squash field or a bean field. And it used to distress him terribly to see the kids at the edges of the field where their parents were working. And so in 1965, when he heard that somebody was trying to set up daycare centers for the kids of the people who harvest our crops, he went and said, I want to work with you. And actually, it was a longer conversation than that, but that's what it boiled down to. The people who were trying to do this were honest, hardworking folks, but they got a good leader when Mr. Rollison joined them. And Mr. Rollison had the ability to communicate with the farm workers and with the farmers. And I always thought he should have been a politician, would have helped us. My father worked with RCMA for the rest of his life. He would go into the daycare centers when we first had them in South Dade, and the little kids would see a white man, and they would run hide behind the teachers. Over the years, as we expanded, as the kids got used to being cared for during the day, they learned the languages, they learned games, they learned their ABCs. RCMA would frequently have a board meeting at a center so that the board members could go and see how the kids were cared for. And I remember Dad coming back from a meeting one day saying, you know, we went into this center in LaBelle and I couldn't move because all these little 4-year-olds came and one of them grabbed my leg and one of them grabbed my cane and one of them was pulling my hand, and they all wanted me to look at what they were working with, what they were playing with. The contrast between those little kids who were scared of the white guy and those little kids who wanted to share what they had learned, that's what made RCMA as important to us as it was. And I grew up in that environment. No wonder I let Barbara make me come to things like this because I am a farmer. I am not good on crowds. I don't speak well. But for RCMA, I will come and tell you that it's very personal to me. She can tell you all the technical stuff. I can tell you that to the farming community, this is an organization that there's nothing else like it. We do good stuff. That's all I have to say.
Perfect.
Barbara, why don't you talk next, and we'll have Lourdes
All right,
close it up.
I'm to talk about the how, and it's been interesting for me to talk to some people here and say, as soon as I hear where they're from and kind of what the agriculture's like, we're all different. So I was talking to someone this morning about dairy farms and said, oh yeah, you could do this, and this is how you could do it, and you need to look at family child care home networks, and you need to talk to your state legislators. And I realize, you've been doing this so long, so let me just say to you that the partnership between do-gooders like myself and farmers is very natural. By the way, I grew up on a dairy farm, so I loved hearing all this stuff about dairy farms. Rode to school with the milk cans in the front of the truck, so it was a long time ago. But we work well together because we all agree that the farm workers are the most important aspect to the success of the farmer, and to the farm workers, the most important thing in their lives are their kids, and no different from any other parent. The partnerships have sustained themselves. The agricultural industry has not given us that $60 million every year. I don't want you to think that. We're about 95% federally funded. But if it were not for the partnership with agriculture, we wouldn't have, for example, we have a state set aside for child care for farm worker kids. No other state has done that, but any state could do it. That wouldn't be hard because most agricultural entities have quite a bit of political clout in their state capitals. What we learned early on was that not only was the partnership with Ag important, but how we staffed our centers was critical. And our centers are staffed with people who have walked in the same shoes as the parents that they serve. So the majority of our staff are Latino, Mexican Americans. They were former farm workers, like Lourdes, and they know simple things. Many of you here are from the Clinicians Network. Simple things like when you bathe a baby, you always wet the top of the head, because that's part of the belief about keeping kids healthy. All right, I didn't wet the top of my kids' heads when I bathed them every single time, but if that's your belief system, then that is to be respected, and that is how you provide care. They're willing to listen about what foods to give or not give to keep a kid healthy, or if a kid has diarrhea or is ill, what you do and what you don't do. As a result, our centers are of extremely high quality. Over half are nationally accredited. And our staff stay with us, so that because we're a migrant program, many of our centers close in June and don't open again. They go to Ohio. The families go to Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, Wisconsin, New York.
Maryland.
Where else?
Maryland.
Maryland. Pretty much, they're everywhere. So when our centers close down in June, our staff are put on layoff. We have the highest unemployment rate, the rating that you get in your state. We pay in the most you can pay, because we lay off all these folks. And they all come back, a heavy, heavy majority. And why do they come back? They come back because they feel good about what they're doing. They know it's making a difference, and they feel respected and honored for the labor that they give us, so that their families can keep on working. We are also an advocacy organization. I think this is what Barbara Lee, who I guess, Barbara, thank you for believing in us, came back all excited. She's no longer going to retire. She's going to work at least as long as I do. Because we work with agriculture on immigration reform. And I will tell you, there's probably nothing more powerful than walking the halls of Congress with Lourdes and a couple of parents and going in and talking to our elected officials about why we need immigration reform, why it's important, what it will mean. And I think we've done a lot of education that hopefully will make a difference. Several years ago, I got a few more minutes?
Oh, yeah.
We decided, the board and I, that we needed to keep on taking care of some of these kids, because we saw kids that were beginning to learn English but not yet fluent, because you really should learn your first language first. You're going to speak better English if your Spanish is strong. So we realized our kids were going to enter into our school systems, which are English only, and struggle. So we started charter schools. And that's been quite an interesting experience, because they're extremely regulated. And we have to do everything every other school does, but we're small. And I am still hanging in there with it, because I believe that we are going to be developed the sustainability of this country based on the backs of these kids who carry with them such incredible family values, respectfulness, fairness, belief in a hard day's work for a hard day's pay, good pay for a hard day's work, giving a hard day's work. And they're people that we need in the future. So that's what the whole reason for the charter school movement is with us. And I'm honored to work with people like Medora, who are one of our board members, and Lourdes, who is a great example of the kinds of parents that we've served and the kinds of staff now that make us successful. So I'm going to turn over to Lourdes to kind of tell you a little bit about herself, and then you can ask any questions you want. I promise we can connect you in your states with people who could help make this happen for you, if you're interested. So, Lourdes.
Well, thank you. I will start by sharing with you how I started with RCMA. I grew up picking crops up and down the East Coast. I planted, picked, did everything that needed to be done to any of the crops that put food on the table. And that is still the families that we work with right now. Prior to RCMA coming to Dover, which is where I was picking strawberries at the time, I was one of those families, like Madora said, that we would take our kids in the back of the pickup truck, find a tree with a shade, and that's where they would be while we worked. As parents, we had to continuously be keeping an eye on, were they okay? Were they not jumping off the truck and getting hurt? So needless to say, I don't think that we were very, very productive because we were doing 2 and 3 jobs at a time. So of course, when RCMA opened the very first child care center in Dover, which was very tiny, and we had heard that it was going to be first come, first serve, and there were only 8 cribs. And I had a baby at the time, so I knew that I had to make sure that I got there early enough so that I could get one of those cribs for my baby. I got there at 4 o'clock in the morning to get in line, and I was a little disappointed that I was not first in line. There were already other people. But then I counted, I'm like, oh, there's enough cribs, I'll be okay. Well, there was a parent in front of me that had twins. So I'm like, oops, okay, well, I'm still okay. Third parent came up and she also had twins, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Thank God we did. My kid was number 8 from the line that were there. And of course, my other 2 children were a little older, so they were not, their spots were not as competitive. So that was my beginning with RCMA. So it was just this life-changing opportunity to be able to drop off the children in the morning, and then we would just go on to work. We knew that they would be taken care of, fed, and most importantly, safe. Because we are very aware of the dangers that lie anywhere outside of an appropriate place for children. So then, of course, the philosophy of RCMA has been from day one is to educate children, parents, and communities. So we were always invited to come in to be a part of so that we could see what the children were learning and what we could do to extend their learning at home or when we moved away to other places. So very soon I realized that there was a lot that I could learn from these people who could put all 20 or 30 kids to sleep at the same time. All of them would eat and went and cleaned their plates and did all the proper things. And it was like, wow, I have to learn these because I don't get all my 3 kids to sleep or eat or do all those things, and it's only 3. So I should learn how this is done. So I became a regular volunteer there at the time and continued to do the crops and moved up and down just like we have always done. Then, of course, as my children went on to elementary school, I had to learn to be the advocate for my children. So basically, that is where I started, because my children, of course, last names are Villanueva, and immediately they were put into the little portable in the back of the school because, of course, this child is not ready for kindergarten. So I remember, here I was very bashful and quiet, but I started calling. What can I do to make sure that my children, like, well, you do have those records and it will show where the child's progress. So I literally had to, I don't want to say fight, but it felt to me like a fight throughout my children's education through the system, because there were always the assumptions that this is where they belong. The latest one was my youngest, who really had a counselor who said, he didn't have the classes that he wanted. And of course, he couldn't get his schedule changed, so I had to come in. And I came in because my son said, well, she said it's not like you're gonna go to college. So I did have to go and look at this person in the face and say, who tells you he's not gonna go to college? So to make a long story short, he graduated from high school with 37 credit hours because he did have the dual enrollment. Through their entire life, they went to school and college, and I was also kind of had started to work with our CMA, and had started my own adult education career, but I was taking my time because I was working full-time. Of course, it was my youngest one who said, like, because the oldest one had started and finished, and I was still going, and the youngest one is like, oh, I'll finish before you do. So it was pretty much like, well, I guess I better get on it. So I did finish before he did. I graduated in that year in December, and he graduated in May, so I beat him to that. So to this day, my work in our CMA is just, I feel that responsibility to help and assist these parents who are doing now what I did back then. Because now my baby just turned 33, day before yesterday. But the families are going through pretty much the same things that I faced back then. And I just want to make sure that at least where we can, we want to make sure that they have the opportunities to be involved in their children's lives. And that's why we partner with anybody and everybody that has anything to offer to our families, which is how we became acquainted with Amy's project, which really was something that was a godsend to our centers, because that is not something that we could just do. So we have always been, I think in the communities that we serve, good players. We want to play with anyone in the community that wants to help and support our families. And this is also how we are very involved with the growers that want to help and participate with what we do with our families. I will leave it at that, so that if there's anything else and other questions.
So we're really interested in actually having a little bit more of a discussion than we've had at some of our other plenary sessions. So we welcome some input from you. I have some questions if we don't have any questions from the audience, and Barbara has probably a few comments as well. So should we just start with if there's any questions in the audience to begin with? And we can't see well, so someone's going to have to help us.
Somebody just stood up. I don't know if that's a question or not.
Amy, I have a question.
Dan?
As these folks are moving,
Wait, let me get a microphone.
as these families and their children are moving in the stream, are you able to coordinate with other similar? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, one of our funding sources is Migrant Head Start, and that is for the folks that move upstream, and there is a network of all of us who get those funds. That's how I said I can connect you with anybody. So the families know, for example, they let us know where they're going. They get a list of the centers. Their records are transferred electronically. It used to be we gave them a handheld record to carry, but now they go in and they just give their last name. They call us electronically, they get it. So the kids are not getting immunized over and over again the way they used to, and their physicals. And if they have an IEP, which is if you have a kid with a disability that needs services continue, they can just continuing it instead of starting all over. So yes, if they're lucky enough to get in everywhere. I mean, our biggest challenge is kids from the north. They seem to get in easier there. When Lourdes' story about getting in line for the center, that was in the old days. Now we have to serve the neediest. So you come in and we actually take a lot of information. We have to serve the poorest of the poor. So what happens is upstream, the families seem to get in. For example, in Michigan, Ohio, when they come back to us, they're not always the neediest, so they're not automatically served. That does cause some problems where they go, well, how come in South Carolina my kid got in, but you're always full, or there are other people more needy. So the short answer to that is absolutely we coordinate, and it's pretty good. Thank you.
I know you've got a big fan club out there, but I'd like to be one of the officers of your fan club sometime. This is a really super program. But could you just share with the group here how you use volunteers? Because that's one of the things that many of us find really critical, that we have unpaid staff and volunteers. And I know you've got quite a gathering of volunteers that help you out.
Well, first of all, I would like Lourdes to talk about the parent volunteers, because those are the most important ones, and then I can throw in some of the others.
Again, pretty much all parents are invited to be involved in their child's education. But of course, once they're there, they want to do more than just helping with their child. So for us, I think that the biggest number of volunteers are our own parents who come, and they're the ones that, help with cleaning